But
one was too many.
But
every Arab child is the equal of a Jewish child. But whose responsibility is it? Who builds? I live in a community here in New York, New Jersey. There is no army base near me. Why are the Hamas headquarters in nurseries? Why does Hamas use these children to die so that you will then point the finger? Now, even Hitler did not do that. The German military headquarters were not built in kindergartens. And let me say one final thing, Piers, if I may. Piers, you know what struck me about your interview with Daniela Weiss? You did not once ask her, what do the people of Gaza want? I don't care what Piers Morgan wants. I don't care what Daniela Weiss wants. I don't care what Cenk Uygur.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here, and this one gets heated fast. Rabbi Shmuley is on Piers Morgan's panel alongside Cenk Uygur, and the conversation spirals from a specific casualty comparison into a genuinely fascinating historical detour about Winston Churchill, the bombing of German cities in World War II, and whether a means justify the ends logic applied to Truman and Churchill can consistently be applied to the current war in Gaza. Things get even more interesting when Piers actually fact-checks Rabbi Shmuley's numbers live on air, correcting a casualty figure that turns out to be off by a significant margin. I want to walk through what actually held up under scrutiny here and what didn't, because there's a real argument buried in all the tension. Stick with me. Get that like in, get subscribed, because we take the time to actually check the numbers. Now let's get into it.
Yeah, look, you just interviewed a terrorist, and she's one of the most vicious terrorists of my lifetime. These settlers are lunatic religious fundamentalists that believe in murdering Palestinians for God. It's an absurd interpretation of any religious document. The overwhelming majority of Jews, by the way, do not agree with them. They don't think that you have to murder Palestinians for God. And so when you asked her that last question, it was actually very interesting what her answer was. You said, do you mind 20,000 children being killed? And she said, as long as they're teaching their children to hate Jews, she seemed to be justifying that we have to kill their children. So think about the absurd logic of that. Since they teach them to hate us, we murdered their children. Gee, I wonder why they hate you. Like, the fact that she can't even see that shows you how painfully stupid this terrorist is. So I'm done. You guys are way too polite to Israel. Israel is a terrorist state. I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in supporting it. I'm not interested in having them steal more Arab land. And I said to you, Piers, a long time ago that this was never about self-defense. This was about taking Gaza. Well, I was right. I've been proven right by Netanyahu and their terrorist government. I called them terrorists, and I said that they would kill more civilians than Hamas. Are you kidding me? They've now, get a load of this fact. Hamas killed 815 civilians on October 7th. Terrible. We've all condemned it 1,000 times. Now Israel has killed 870 Palestinians under the age of 1. They have killed more Palestinian babies than Hamas killed civilians on October 7th. And every time it's a justification. No, we talked to God. God told us to steal Arab land. God told us to murder Arab children. What kind of sick state is this? When I saw her smiling, like you said, and smirking, now when I see a lot of these Israeli leaders, I feel like I'm looking at Germans telling us, no, it's okay. We can do this to the Jews. There's going to be no consequences. And their smugness partly, Piers, has to do with the fact that they think we own America. There's nothing you can do. We control the largest military in the history of the world. We can get them to do whatever we want because AIPAC has bought the entire U.S. government. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. I mean, today Trump is talking about, you're not going to get the Epstein files. You're not going to get anything. We're occupied. We're all Palestinians now.
Rabbi Shmuley, I mean, when you listened to that interview with Daniela Weiss, what did you feel about it?
Piers, thank you for having me on. And having had a surprisingly civil debate at Oxford University with my brother Cenk, I'm actually going to excuse his hyperbole of calling Jews Nazis and stick to the facts, because you were right, Piers, in your discussion with Daniela.
Stop
she
smearing Jews.
No, Cenk, please don't. Okay, you're already interrupting me. Just be civil, please. We had a civil debate at Oxford. Let's try to continue. We shook hands afterward. Hundreds of thousands of people said how much they enjoyed watching us shake hands. Let's be human a little bit. I'm going to do what you said, Piers, and stick to the facts. Number one, Cenk just said that Israel killed so many more civilians that were killed on October 7th. 45,000 Britons died in the Battle of Britain when the Luftwaffe and Hermann Goering, bombed London, Northampton to smithereens. But Churchill killed 700,000 German children. He killed 3 million German civilians. That was terrible. But here's my question to you, Piers. Outside of Parliament is a giant statue of Churchill as the greatest statesman in the history of Britain. Was Churchill a war criminal, yes or no?
No, Churchill wasn't a war criminal. In fact, Matthew, I saw you shaking your head.
Okay. You said facts. You said facts.
Well, hang on. If you're going to make statements like Churchill,
45. Wait.
Your numbers aren't correct
you can
about
expand.
the number of civilians who died. Never mind anything else.
Yes, they are. There were 3 million German civilians killed by Britain and by the United States. There were 70,000 Japanese killed on a single day in Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Half of them were children. 35,000. Was Harry Truman a war criminal? Was Roosevelt a war? If you are prepared to say, Piers, based on facts and based on what Cenk just said, that the proportion of civilians to combatant deaths determines whether you're a war criminal. And by the way, Churchill killed 5 civilians for every 1 German combatant. The United States in Fallujah killed 4 civilians in Fallujah in Iraq for every 1 terrorist Iraqi combatant. So was George W. Bush a war criminal? Was Tony Blair a criminal? If you're prepared to at least be consistent and say that, yes,
I think Bush and Blair were war criminals.
3 million. Was Churchill... Okay, do you think that Winston Churchill was a war criminal? It's a yes or no question.
No.
The same way you put it to Daniela, yes or no?
Churchill,
So
Churchill can kill 3 million
All right, you've
Germans,
asked a question.
Okay?
You've asked a question. Matthew.
I think it's a completely coherent and fair question. It's about means and ends. Is the means justified to achieve a given end? For what it's worth, I think that consequentialist approach is legitimate. I think that Truman was justified in the atomic bombs. I say that reluctantly. But I think there would have been many more deaths had the Second World War not been brought to an end in that way. I know some people will disagree with that position. However,
if I may just finish, you're one of the most fair person that I've ever spoken to about on this show. All I'm saying is, let's be clear. Piers, God weeps for every Palestinian child, the 20,000 children. I don't know if it's 20,000, but even if it is, weeps for every one. One was too many. But every Arab child is the equal of a Jewish child. But whose responsibility is it? Who builds? I live in a community here in New York, New Jersey. There is no army base near me. Why are the Hamas headquarters in nurseries? Why does Hamas use these children to die so that you will then point the finger? Now, even Hitler did not do that. The German military headquarters were not built in kindergartens. And let me say one final thing, Piers, if I may. Piers, you know what struck me about your interview with Daniela Weiss? You did not once ask her, what do the people of Gaza want? I don't care what Piers Morgan wants. I don't care what Daniela Weiss wants. I don't care what Cenk Uygur wants. I don't care what Rabbi Shmuley wants.
To lead.
The people of Gaza don't speak for them in the same way I won't. They have not had a vote since 2005 when Hamas took the leaders of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, and threw their opponents off the roofs and killed them. Then Hamas abolished all elections. Now, I want the people of Gaza to vote. Do you want to remain in that tiny hovel where you don't have a backyard, where any money that's given to Hamas, if it's rebuilt, will be, again, it'll go to tunnels? Remember that the Hamas got triple the Marshall aid per capita per Palestinian, and they didn't build one bomb shelter, they didn't build one school, they didn't build one university, they just built tunnels and rockets. Ask the people. So, Piers, let me ask you, why did you ask
may I say to the rabbi, forgive me for persisting here.
Decide where they want to live.
But the rabbi did say, I think legitimately, that he had been interrupted and he didn't like it. I was halfway through the point that I was making, if I may say so, when you jumped in. I said that I thought Truman was justified. That's fine. In ending the Pacific War. I think Churchill was justified in trying to end the war in Europe. What I don't understand, and I think a lot of people who are instinctively pro-Israel do not understand are where are the sunlit uplands on the other side of the evisceration of Gaza. I've been told by senior Israeli officials, confidentially, that young Gazans, Palestinians and people across the Middle East are being radicalised, that these dead Hamas fighters are being replaced at a rate of 5 to 1. This isn't going to affect Israel for the next 5 months or 5 years, but for the next 50 years. And how on earth is flattening Gaza going to help the protection of Israel when their funders are in Tehran?
No, I agree.
The image, and let me just make one final point. In the medium term, I say to the rabbi, and I say this with great sincerity, the image of Israel, I don't want to superficialise it, but the brand of Israel, that liberal democracy in a tough neighbourhood which sits unconsciously behind Western support and has done since the Second World War, has been obliterated, shattered into a million pieces. The next generation of American leaders are going to grow up where the most salient image in their minds is not going to be the Holocaust, as it is for our generation. It's going to be emaciated Gazan children dying in their thousands, being starved via a blockade. I say to you, I understand why Israelis and Jews rallied around Netanyahu after October the 7th. Who wouldn't? After an atrocity of that kind. But I believe you've been goaded into an overreaction that will reverberate through history of great strategic disadvantage to a country I want to do well.
I see you.
All right, and before I let Rabbi Shmuley respond, before you respond, Rabbi Shmuley, I just wanted to pick you up on the statistics that you regaled at the start of that, which I think you said that the British killed 3 million German civilians, including 300,000 children. Is that what you said?
A 5 to 1 combatant to civilian
just to be
ratio.
clear, you said 3 million, and of which 300,000 were children. That's what you said, right?
Right.
It's
the British decimated Cologne, they decimated Berlin, they decimated Hamburg, they decimated Dresden. In Dresden, they killed 30,000 in one night, etc.
Let me finish my point. You were completely wrong. You were wildly exaggerating the number of civilians killed by the British bombing campaigns, the Allied bombing campaigns. It's estimated between 350 and 500,000 German civilians were killed in total by Allied bombing in World War II. And I would also add this. At the end of
Okay, so I said
Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. So it was a sixth of what you said, in fact. But the wider point is we brought in the Geneva Convention at the end of World War II specifically to address the issues of mass civilian casualties in World War II. The UK signed up to that. Most countries of the world signed up to the Geneva. Israel is a signatory to the Geneva Convention, and yet it breaches regularly the Geneva Convention, including, many believe, what they're now doing as a government in Gaza.
Let's start with the moment that actually matters most from a factual standpoint, because it's rare to see a live correction like this happen on air. Rabbi Shmuley claimed the British killed 3 million German civilians, including 300,000 children, during World War II bombing campaigns, and used that comparison to argue for a consequentialist standard around civilian casualties in war. Piers pushed back directly and cited a commonly used historical estimate of roughly 350,000 to 500,000 German civilians killed by Allied bombing overall, meaning the number cited was significantly higher than most historical estimates support. That's worth noting because it happened live, in real time, and it's a good example of why specific casualty figures thrown into a heated debate deserve verification rather than automatic acceptance, regardless of which side is citing them. The broader philosophical question underneath that exchange is a real one, though. Is the ends justify the tragic means framework, as applied historically to Churchill or Truman, a coherent standard to apply consistently, including to current conflicts? Cenk's challenge, essentially asking whether Bush and Blair should also be judged as war criminals under the same civilian to combatant ratio logic, is a fair test of consistency. Rabbi Shmuley's answer that he does apply that consequentialist standard consistently and thinks Truman's decision was justified, at least engages with the question directly rather than dodging it, which is worth acknowledging even if you disagree with the conclusion. On the specific casualty figures cited about the current Gaza war, including the claim about Palestinian infant deaths compared to October 7th civilian deaths, those are exactly the kind of numbers that shift and get disputed constantly, depending on the source, and I'll encourage checking current figures against organizations like the UN or WHO, who directly rather than any single commentary clips numbers, including this one, the genocide characterization that comes up at the end of the clip and in the narration around it is again one of the most contested legal and factual questions in this entire conflict. Serious legal scholars, human rights organizations, and governments land in different places on whether the specific legal elements of genocide, particularly the intent requirement, have been established here. I'm not going to hand you a verdict on that from a panel debate. It's worth treating as the actively disputed question it is, rather than settled fact. Either way, where I think the most genuinely important point in the whole exchange came from was the strategic argument, not the moral one. The observation that flattening Gaza may radicalize a new generation across the region at a replacement rate that outpaces whatever tactical gains are made in the near term. That's a testable, empirical claim about long-term security outcomes, separate from the moral debate entirely. And it's the kind of argument that deserves serious engagement, regardless of where you land on the underlying conflict. So tell me, do you think a consequentialist standard, judging wartime actions primarily by outcomes rather than absolute rules, can ever be applied consistently, or does it inevitably just become a justification after the fact? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns that actually check the numbers instead of just repeating them, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.